The agent at the front of the security line barely lifted his head when the commotion began. It started with a laugh, sharp, careless, echoing far louder than it should have in the bright glass-roofed atrium of San Meridian International Airport. Midday sunlight beamed across the security lanes, turning polished floors into mirrors and leaving nowhere for shadows to hide. At Lane 3, a uniformed checkpoint officer ripped open an old canvas duffel, sending its contents scattering across the stainless steel inspection table. Clothes, toiletries, a folded jacket, everything tossed out like junk at a yard sale. "Seriously?" the officer scoffed loudly. "This all you got, sir? Looks like a bag straight out of a surplus store dumpster." The two officers beside him laughed. The sound cut through the busy terminal like a blade. Travelers slowed, watching. But the man they were mocking didn't flinch. He was tall, broad-shouldered, in his early 40s. Rogan Mireless, according to the faded name stitched on the duffel. His short-sleeved shirt exposed thick, sinewed forearms, the kind forged from real work, not gym posing. He wore jeans, boots, and a steady expression that could have belonged to a man waiting for a bus. He didn't interrupt. He didn't argue. He simply observed, still as granite, while they continued tearing through the bag. Before I tell you what happened next, subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It helps more than you know. Officer Jaron, the youngest of the three, held up a faded embroidered strip of fabric he'd found stitched inside the lining. A black patch with only half its insignia remaining. The worn threads formed the top of a wing, nothing more. "What's this supposed to be?" he smirked. "Some elite superhero club? Special laundry forces, maybe?" More laughter. Anything but kind. Rogan didn't reach for the patch. He didn't defend it. He simply remained still, eyes calm behind dark lashes, absorbing every detail of the officer's behavior with quiet, razor-sharp awareness. He looked like a man who had endured far worse than mockery, a man who didn't break easily. The midday sun poured in uninterrupted through skylights overhead, illuminating his face, the table, and the three amused officers. There were no shadows to hide expressions, no dim corners to distort intentions. Everything was visible, crisp, bright, undeniable. Another officer further down the lane, older, composed, observant, glanced up from his station. His badge read, Supervisor Denton Hale. Unlike the others, he watched Rogan with a different kind of focus. Something about the man's stillness struck him as practiced. Meanwhile, Officer Jaron continued emptying the duffel. A rolled-up photo slid across the table. He carelessly pushed it with the back of his hand. "Let me guess," he said mockingly. "Old buddies from Basic? Or one of those convention photo ops?" But as he flattened the photo, his laughter faded slightly. The figures in the picture were standing in full daylight, desert gear, posture-controlled, faces covered by operational shadow. Not from darkness, but from deliberate shielding. Something about it looked too real, too disciplined, too classified. Rogan reached out and retrieved the photo before Jaron could flip it again. His movement was smooth, controlled. "That's personal," Rogan said plainly. The tone wasn't confrontational. It was simply factual. Still, the officers scoffed. "Relax, man, we're just doing our jobs," the lead officer grumbled. "Bags clear, pack up and move along." But Rogan didn't move immediately, because he had just noticed Supervisor Hale tapping his radio twice. Subtle, quick, then stepping away with careful composure. Rogan had seen that gesture before. Years ago, in another life, in places where sunlight was the only honest thing for miles. He didn't look toward Hale. He didn't acknowledge the signal, but he knew what it meant. A silent protocol had been activated. Behind him, passengers shuffled impatiently. Officers resumed their chatter. Everything looked normal, yet Rogan felt the shift instantly, like air pressure changing before a storm hits open ground. And he knew the next few minutes would unravel everything he had spent 5 years building, everything he had tried to bury, everything that still whispered one name, Predator Shadow. But before Rogan could lift his duffel from the table, a pair of men in unmarked black uniforms stepped into the sunlit terminal, moving with purpose, and the entire checkpoint fell silent. The two men in black uniforms didn't rush. They didn't posture. They didn't even raise their voices. They simply appeared, stepping through the sun-washed entrance of the terminal as if they'd been waiting outside for the perfect moment to reveal themselves. San Meridian International Airport's atrium was drenched in natural midday light. Glass ceilings, reflective floors, sunlight bouncing off every polished surface. There was nowhere for tension to hide. Everything unfolded in the open. They moved straight toward Lane 3, their boots striking the floor in a steady cadence that made several travelers look up. Their uniforms bore no familiar agency insignia, only a subdued crest stitched faintly in gray. Something about their posture, their precision, their calmness in a crowded public space, none of it fit standard airport security. Officer Jaron stopped laughing the moment he noticed them. Supervisor Hale didn't. He didn't even turn his head. He simply stepped back into a nearby service alcove, his radio in hand, speaking in low, controlled tones. Rogan Meyerless stood still. He didn't stiffen, didn't react, didn't reveal recognition. But inside his chest, something old and dangerous coiled awake, an instinct he had suppressed for 5 long years. The taller of the two newcomers addressed him directly. "Sir," he said in a neutral voice, "please remain where you are." His phrasing, his tonality, the controlled breath behind each syllable. It wasn't the language of someone requesting compliance. It was the language of someone delivering protocol. The lead TSA officer scoffed. Excuse me? We're in the middle of an inspection." The operative didn't acknowledge him. Instead, the second man, shorter and broader, stepped forward with a handheld device that looked nothing like standard scanning equipment. They weren't here for contraband. They weren't here for a threat. They were here for him. Officer Jaron finally found his voice. "Hold on. What's going on? Who are you people?" The lead operative turned only his eyes. Slow, deliberate, clear this lane. That was all. But the tone, flat, command grade, absolute, made something primordial stir in the room. Travelers stepped back on instinct. Within seconds, the surrounding officers complied without thinking. Even the ones who wanted to argue found their mouths dry, their logic stuttering. Supervisor Hale reappeared at the edge of the commotion, watching the operatives carefully. Not fearful, but knowing. Rogan recognized that expression. It belonged to people who understood protocols most others never heard of. The taller operative lifted his device. A soft chime sounded. Clean, clear, unmistakable. Both operatives came to attention. "Clearance confirmed," the tall one said. "Predator shadow status remains active." The checkpoint froze. No one breathed. The TSA officers stared wide-eyed, utterly unprepared for a phrase they'd never heard before but instinctively understood was not normal, not standard, not even remotely public knowledge. Rogan closed his eyes for a fraction of a second. 5 years. 5 years of silence. 5 years of trying to live behind a normal man's face. And a half-destroyed patch had dragged him back into a world he had buried. Officer Jaron swallowed hard. Wait. Predator what? What did you just say?" The taller operative finally looked at him. "A designation above your clearance level." Jaron's jaw slackened. "Sir, we were just—" Rogan cut him off gently. "It's done." Just 2 words. Calm. Steady. Without anger. But they hit harder than shouting ever could. The lead operative gestured. "Mr. Meyerless, we need you to come with us. Verification protocol is mandatory." "I have a flight," Rogan said evenly. "That will be handled," the man replied, stepping aside in a respectful but firm invitation. Before Rogan moved, Supervisor Hale approached, bright sunlight catching the fine lines around his eyes. "Sir," Hale said quietly, "if I may, this is above anything happening at this checkpoint." Rogan studied him. "You recognize the signal." Hale exhaled, a subtle nod. "Only one group uses that pattern." The atmosphere shifted again, subtle but sharp. Like the moment right before a blade leaves its sheath, Officer Jaron suddenly looked pale. "Sir, I'm sorry about your bag. We didn't know. We didn't mean—" Rogan didn't answer him. Not with forgiveness, not with anger. He simply shouldered the duffel, what remained of it, and said, "You never do." The operatives flanked him as he stepped away from the lane. Travelers stared openly. Some even lifted phones before security barked at them to lower them. Sunlight flooded the corridor ahead of him. Bright, clear, unforgiving. Same as the truth he'd been outrunning. And the moment the three men turned the corner into the inspection wing's private hallway, the door sealed behind them with a soft pneumatic click. A click that felt like the first domino tipping over. But the real shock came when the biometric scanner lit up green, not just confirming his identity, but activating a protocol no one believed still existed, and summoning a man Rogan hoped he'd never see again. The private verification hallway was nothing like the dim interrogation rooms most travelers imagined. San Meridian Airport kept even its restricted corridors bright. White walls, skylights overhead, and sunlight pouring in through frosted glass panels. Everything was clean, open, and well lit, which made the tension stand out even more sharply. Rogan Mireless walked between the two black uniformed operatives, his posture relaxed but his mind calculating. He didn't ask where they were going, he already knew. They ushered him into a glass-paneled verification suite, a room intentionally designed to look non-threatening. Sunlight washed the space, reflecting off the metal table and casting soft shadows across the floor. The taller operative placed a biometric device on the table. "Please place your hand on the surface, sir." "Last time I did this," Rogan said calmly, "I didn't exactly get a thank you note." Neither operative reacted. That told him plenty. He laid his palm down, a soft hum. Then the scanner lit up bright, unambiguous green. Match confirmed. Designation: Predator Shadow. Status: dormant. Authorized. The shorter operative straightened with instinctive discipline. "Sir, we didn't expect the system to respond." Rogan raised an eyebrow. "You and me both." A second green indicator flashed. "Alert sent to command. Level 1 priority." The tall operative immediately pressed a finger to his earpiece. "They've acknowledged the alert. Command is mobilizing. Not checking, not verifying. Mobilizing." That meant something worse than anyone here understood. Rogan exhaled slowly. He'd hoped this day would never come. He turned to the operatives, studying them with the skill of someone who once trained men just like them. "You two know what this clearance meant, don't you?" The shorter one swallowed. "My instructor told us Predator Shadow was a myth, a ghost unit." "It was never a ghost," Rogan corrected softly. "Just buried." The tall operative hesitated before asking, "Sir, should we expect additional personnel?" Rogan didn't answer, because footsteps echoed down the hall. Measured, confident, purposeful. Someone who walked like a man used to command entire theaters, not just rooms. The door swung open. A man in a crisp slate-gray uniform stepped inside, sunlight catching the silver eagles on his shoulders. His hair was more salt than pepper now, jaw firmer, presence heavier. His gaze locked onto Rogan with recognition sharpened by 5 silent years. "Bishop Morellis," he said quietly. No greeting, no rank, just the name Rogan had sworn no one would ever use again. Rogan stared back, jaw tightening. "General Calum Reese." The two operatives immediately snapped to attention. The general waved them off. "At ease, and step outside." They obeyed instantly, sealing the glass door behind them. Now the sunlight fell across just 2 men, one who had vanished and one who had failed to let him stay gone. Rogan crossed his arms. "You shouldn't be here, Calum, and you shouldn't have triggered a dormant protocol," the general replied. "I didn't." An overzealous officer tore open a lining. General Reese's expression hardened. "Then the situation is worse than I thought." Rogan said nothing. "You understand what happens now," Reese continued. "A clearance reactivation at your level automatically wakes every contingency associated with Predator Shadow." "I walked away," Rogan said flatly. "You don't get to walk away from what you were." Rogan gave a cold half-smile. "I did for 5 years. Peacefully." Reese's voice dropped. "You don't know what's coming." Rogan's jaw tightened. "Then tell me." Reese pulled a thin, matte black tablet from inside his jacket and slid it across the table. Sunlight reflected off its metal edge. Rogan tapped the screen. A classified image appeared. A man he knew. A man who should have been dead 6 years ago. Rogan's fingers curled into fists. "No," he whispered. "That's not possible." "It's confirmed," Reese said. "He resurfaced 12 days ago." Rogan stared at the screen, at the face he'd buried, the enemy he believed he'd ended, the one operation he never spoke of, the one scar buried deeper than all the others. "He's alive," Reese confirmed. And he's looking for you. Rogan's pulse slowed, a dangerous, focused calm settling over him, the kind he hadn't felt since the day everything burned. Why now? He asked. He didn't just return, Reese said. He brought something with him. What? Names, the general answered. And you're the first one on the list. A quiet knock at the glass snapped the tension. The shorter operative leaned in. General, Command just sent an update. The man in the photo, he was sighted in this city less than 1 hour ago. Rogan slowly looked up. Here, now, in daylight, hunting him. Reese met his eyes. You triggered the system, Bishop, but he triggered something far worse. And before Rogan could ask another question, the operatives rushed back into the room. Because someone else had just entered the airport. Someone the system hadn't anticipated, but Rogan feared more than anyone alive. The two operatives burst into the glass-walled verification room so fast the door slammed against its stopper. Sunlight spilled across their uniforms, bright enough to highlight the tension in their eyes. General, sir, someone else just entered the concourse, the shorter operative said, breath tight. Security cameras picked him up only seconds ago. General Calum Reese didn't move at first. He just looked at Rogan, because he already knew. Show me, Reese ordered. The tall operative tapped his wrist device, projecting a real-time feed onto the glass panel beside them. The bright midday view of the San Meridian Airport concourse filled the screen. Families dragging suitcases, business travelers glancing at their watches, sunlight flooding the open atrium through towering skylights. Normal, ordinary, except for him. A man stepped into the frame. No hat, no glasses, no attempt to hide. He moved like someone who understood every blind spot, every angle, every tactical advantage. He blended and stood out at the same time, an impossible contradiction unless someone had been trained at the highest level. Rogan's breath left him like a punch to the ribs. Garrick, he said. Calum Reese confirmed it with a grim nod. Your former counterpart. No, not just counterpart. Garrick Vale had once been Predator Shadow's equal, its mirror, and the only operative who ever matched Rogan blow for blow. 5 years ago, Garrick was believed dead in a collapsed compound overseas. A mission Rogan had led, a mission Rogan believed had ended permanently. But the man on the screen wasn't a ghost. He was very much alive and walking calmly past Gate 32. Why daylight? Rogan asked quietly. Why here? Reese's answer chilled the air despite the warmth streaming from the skylights. He wants you to see him. The operative's feed zoomed automatically as the airport's cameras tracked Garrick's movement. He wasn't approaching security. He wasn't heading for an exit. He was walking straight toward the restricted hallway where Rogan stood. General, we need to relocate the asset, the tall operative said, hand shifting toward his holster. No, Rogan said immediately. He'll follow. And if you try to move me, people get hurt. Sir, your safety. My safety isn't his goal. The room went silent. Reese frowned. Explain. Rogan's voice stayed calm, but his hands curled slightly at his sides, old instincts waking. Garrick doesn't do sloppy. He doesn't do messages. If he wanted me dead, he'd be at the rooftop with a scope, not strolling through a crowd. Then what does he want? Reese asked. Rogan watched the screen. Garrick paused at a coffee kiosk, sunlight catching the scar across his jaw. An old wound Rogan had given him years ago. Garrick ordered a drink, waited, looked around casually like any traveler. And then he did something impossible to ignore. He turned and stared directly into the security camera, as though he could see Rogan through it. A slow smile touched Garrick's lips. Not mocking, knowing, almost welcoming. Rogan's pulse slowed even further, a sign Calum Reese recognized all too well. That expression, Reese murmured. Bishop, he's not here to attack. No, Rogan said, he's here to challenge. Reese stiffened. Challenge you how? Rogan stepped closer to the glass panel, eyes locked on Garrick's image. In our old program, he said, voice low, there were only 2 reasons an elite operative resurfaced after being presumed dead. 1, revenge. He paused. 2, extraction. Reese's face hardened. Extraction? Of what? Or who? Rogan looked at him. Me. The shorter operative's voice cracked. General, he's changing direction. He's heading straight for the security corridor entrance. The screen showed Garrick walking with deliberate calm through the bright concourse, weaving through travelers without breaking pace. Sunlight gleamed off the polished floors as his reflection stretched behind him. Rogan's jaw tightened. "Calum," he said quietly. "If he's here to bring me back, then this isn't a confrontation." Reese swallowed. "Then what is it?" Rogan turned from the screen, face steady, voice iron. "It's a recall." The tall operative's hand flew to his weapon. "Sir, authorization to intercept?" "Denied," Rogan said instantly. "General?" the operative asked anxiously. Reese didn't answer right away. He watched Rogan, really watched him, the way only someone who had once commanded him could. The daylight pouring across Rogan's shoulders made him look exactly like he used to. Unshakable, unreadable, dangerous. Reese exhaled. "Stand down," he ordered. The operatives froze, and that was when Garrick Vale stepped into the corridor entrance. No weapon in hand, no threat displayed, just sunlight illuminating him like a man returning from the dead with a purpose only Rogan understood. Before a word could be exchanged, a second alert blared. Far louder, far sharper. Command had just identified a third operative entering the airport. One neither Rogan nor Reese had ever expected to see again. The alert cut through the hallway like a blade. Sharper, louder, unmistakably urgent. Every operative in the area snapped to attention, hands hovering near holsters even before the system finished identifying the new threat. General Calum Reese read the alert first. His face shifted. Not with fear. Rogan had never seen Reese fear, but with something far more unnerving. Recognition. "Who else is here?" Rogan demanded. Reese swallowed once, the sunlight from the skylights catching the tension in his jaw. "Someone who should be halfway across the world," he murmured. "Someone who was never supposed to be active again." The tall operative tapped his wrist device and expanded the security feed. The daytime brightness of San Meridian Airport washed over the screen. Gleaming tile floors, glass walls reflecting sun, travelers moving in easy patterns. The camera panned, then froze. A second man had entered the concourse. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with controlled precision. But unlike Garrick, this one did not blend into the environment. He carried presence like pressure, authority like gravity, and an expression carved from cold steel. Rogan's breath stilled. "No," he whispered. General Reese nodded grimly. "Yes," because walking through the sunlit terminal, scanning the crowd with the unmistakable posture of command, was Commander Rylan Creed. Rylan Creed, the man who helped build Predator Shadow from the ground up. Rylan Creed, the man who vanished 12 years ago during a classified, disavowed mission. Rylan Creed, the ghost above ghosts. The only man both Rogan and Garrick once answered to. And he was walking directly into the same airport. "What are the odds?" the shorter operative whispered. "None," Reese answered. "This isn't coincidence. This is convergence." On the screen, Garrick paused at a signpost. Rylan paused across the atrium, sunlight hitting him full force. Both men looked toward the same direction, toward Rogan. Reese stepped closer to the screen, voice low and urgent. Garrick's return was destabilizing enough, but Rylan appearing now means one thing. Rogan finished the sentence. "The program was never dead." The tall operative stiffened. "General, what are your orders?" Reese didn't answer immediately. He turned to Rogan, the only man alive who had been at the heart of Predator Shadow's most classified operations. Daylight spilled across Rogan's shoulders as he watched two ghosts draw closer to each other in the concourse. Reese spoke softly. "Tell me exactly what I'm looking at." Rogan inhaled, steady but weighed down. "You're looking at the 3 remaining founders of a program that was supposed to disappear. One presumed dead, one confirmed dead, one retired. And now all 3 in the same building?" Reese pressed. "Yes," Rogan said, "and not by coincidence." On the screen, Garrick stepped forward. Rylan stepped forward, toward each other, toward him. The tall operative whispered, "Sir, if these 2 men confront each other, this airport is not equipped for what happens next." Rogan nodded. "They don't confront each other, they confront me." The feed zoomed. Garrick moved with his usual calculated calm, sunlight catching the scar Rogan had carved across his jaw years ago. Rylan moved differently, deliberate, heavier, as if every step measured the consequences of appearing again after more than a decade. Rogan clenched his jaw. "They're not here to attack," he said. "They're here to collect." The shorter operative frowned. "Collect who?" Rogan looked at him, expression unshakable. "Me." General Reese inhaled slowly, internal gears turning. He knew the truth now. This wasn't an ambush. It wasn't a threat. It was a recall signal from the deepest tier of a program that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. "Bishop," Reese said, voice lower. "If these men are returning, then it means the entire foundation of Predator Shadow is shifting again." Rogan nodded once. "And whatever they're here for, my involvement isn't optional." The operative stiffened as the airport feed showed a security barrier opening. Garrick slipped through. Ryland scanned his credentials without breaking stride. Both were now walking down the same sunlit hallway that led to the restricted verification wing. "General," the tall operative said urgently, "should we evacuate this area?" Reese shook his head. "No, that will escalate them." The short operative gulped. "Then what do we do?" Reese looked at Rogan, the only anchor in the chaos. "We wait," Rogan answered, "and we listen." A long silent beat passed. And then, "They're here." Garrick Vale appeared at the far end of the corridor first, sunlight behind him casting a long shadow. A second later, Commander Ryland Creed stepped into view on the opposite side, expression unreadable, posture imposing. Both men walked toward Rogan from different directions at the same time, not hunting him, not threatening him, but summoning him. Garrick spoke first. 3 words Rogan never expected to. "Here again. Bishop, it's time." But before Rogan could respond, Ryland Creed revealed the real reason they came, and it wasn't a reunion, it was a warning. Sunlight poured through the tall glass windows of the restricted wing, turning the polished floors into bright reflections as both men approached. Rogan Bishop held perfectly still, posture straight, jaw set, every part of him aligned with the man he used to be. Garrick Vale stopped first, close enough for Rogan to see the faint sun-cut lines across his face. Ryland Creed stopped a few steps behind him, shadow shorter, shoulders broader, presence heavier. Neither spoke for several seconds. The hall hummed with daytime airport noise behind the security doors, rolling luggage wheels, faint overhead announcements, and the distant echo of conversations, all painfully normal compared to the storm pressing in on the 3 men standing here now. General Reese remained behind Rogan, flanked by 2 operatives. But even he knew this moment was not his to interrupt. Rogan broke the silence. "Say it," he murmured. "Say why you're here." Garrick exhaled. "We didn't come to drag you back, Bishop." Rogan's brow tightened. "Then what?" Ryland Creed's voice, deep, calm, unshakably authoritative, cut through the corridor. "The recall protocol has been activated." The air shifted instantly. Behind Rogan, the tall operative stiffened. General Reese muttered, "That's impossible." That protocol was erased. Ryland stepped forward, sunlight hitting the silver streak at his temple. "No, it was archived, buried, but never destroyed." Rogan didn't blink. "Who activated it?" "Not command," Garrick answered quietly. "Not any branch, not any agency." Ryland finished the sentence. "Predator Shadow activated it automatically." Rogan's jaw clenched. "That system doesn't run autonomously." "It does," Ryland said. "When all 3 founding operatives are detected alive within the same continental grid." The realization struck Rogan like a physical blow. 3 men, 3 ghosts, all in daytime, all in the same building. The algorithm had done what no human ever could. It resurrected the entire program. Rogan swallowed. "You're telling me Predator Shadow recalled itself?" Ryland offered the faintest nod. "You understand what that means." Reese stepped forward. "Someone explain." "Now." Garrick glanced at him, then at Rogan. "When we built Predator Shadow, we embedded a final failsafe. Something deeper than any official clearance. If the program ever detected a Level 7 breach that targeted all 3 founding operatives, it would reactivate us automatically," Rogan murmured. Ryland's eyes locked with his. "And the breach has already happened." General Reese exhaled. "What breach?" Garrick answered softly, almost reluctantly. "Someone accessed the original precursor files." Rogan stiffened. "No," he said. "Those files were erased 17 years ago." Ryland shook his head. "They were hidden, and someone found them. And whoever accessed them," Garrick added, "knows every detail of who we were, every mission, Every classified operation, every buried mistake, a long beat. Your civilian identity isn't safe anymore, Rogan, Ryland said. Neither is ours. Rogan Bishop had spent 7 years building a life where sunlight wasn't a threat. A life without shadows, without surveillance, without codes or recalls or enemies he couldn't name. And now, it's starting again, Rogan whispered. Ryland took a step closer, lowering his voice. We're not here to force you into anything. The protocol activated, but it doesn't bind us. It only warns us. Garrick nodded. You have a choice. Rogan stared at both men, the only people alive who knew the weight he once carried. And if I walk away? Ryland's expression tightened. Then you walk away. No consequences, Garrick added. But the breach won't walk away from you. Rogan breathed slowly, deeply. Sunlight warmed the side of his face, but it did nothing to ease the cold in his chest. What do you want from me? He asked. The answer came from both men simultaneously. Your judgment, not your rank, not your authority, not your muscle, not your history, just who he was, just what he knew. Rogan looked down the hall, a sunlit path that led to the civilian life he'd fought so hard to build. Then he looked back at the 2 ghosts who had come to warn him. He wasn't being summoned. He wasn't being hunted. He was being trusted. For a long moment, Rogan said nothing. Finally, he spoke. Fine. I'll hear the full briefing. Relief, subtle but real, passed across both their faces. General Reese stepped closer. We can arrange a secure room. No, Ryland interrupted. Sunlit conference hall. Think about your prompts. Nothing dim, nothing shadowy. Rogan nearly smirked. Still dramatic, Ryland shrugged. Only when necessary. Garrick motioned toward the bright exit. This way, Bishop. Rogan followed. 3 men walking together again, not as soldiers, not as ghosts, but as the only ones who understood the storm that was coming. Whatever waited for them, the world would never see it, because some wars didn't happen in darkness. Some began in the brightest daylight, and this one was already here. And if you've been listening this far, subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments what time it is where you're watching from. It helps more than you know.